Before you close this book, I want to tell you what I saw in the Sedona Desert the week this book was born. I had gone to walk the venue, to stand in the space where I would place this book in the hands of the first women to hold it. Before I left, I stopped at Oak Creek. I brought roses, one for every woman who had said yes to coming, and I placed them at the water's edge as an offering. The land had been given to us before we even arrived. The healing that happens in Sedona does not wait for ceremony to begin. It begins the moment you say yes. So I gave something back. Roses for the roses who are coming. That is the covenant of sacred land. We receive and we return. We take what the earth is already offering and we give back something living in gratitude. On my way back, Mother Sedona answered me. There on the hillside stood an agave in full death bloom, the quiote rising into the Sedona sky, golden blooms at every branch, the mother plant at her base, her rosette spent, every drop of energy she had stored for decades, giving completely into that one magnificent rise. I stopped. I had written this entire book, every chapter, every meditation, every window from my sanctuary, and I had not seen it until that moment on a desert road back from Oak Creek with rose petals still on my hands. The book is the Quixote. Everything I stored, the healing room, the training, the 3 weekly lives, the community, the manuscript written section by section. In the early mornings before anyone else was awake, that was the Rosette feeling. 30 years of root work quietly storing what would one day have to rise. Most people walked past life during those years and saw nothing remarkable. They did not know what was being held in there. They did not know what was coming. And then one season, the decision was made at the cellular level. The Kyoto broke ground. The book rose. The ceremony happened. The first women held this in their hands on the eve of the summer solstice in Sedona. On the sacred land that received our roses and gave us back confirmation that we were exactly where we were supposed to be. The mother plant does not survive the bloom. That is the part that requires courage to name. The version of me that kept this medicine private, that refined it carefully, that protected it while it was still forming. She did not walk out of that ceremony room the same woman who had walked in. She composted. She went back to the soil. What rose in her place is a woman who already gave everything away, who already released the seeds, who already knows the pups are rooted in the lineage continues. I stood on that desert road and I understood all of it before I had the words for it. The land already knew. The roses were already at the water. The agave was already blooming. This is what this book did in my body, and it is what it is doing in yours. Every chapter asks you to convert what was stored, the grief, the patterns, the samskaras, the inherited survival intelligence of your lineage into something that could rise. The tending was the storing. The practices were the years of quiet work in the rosette. The science showed you what was actually happening in your body. The Christ consciousness teachings showed you what you were already always rising toward. So the bloom is not a metaphor. It is a biological event that happens in the nervous system of a woman who does this work. The epigenetic switches change, the vagus tone shifts, the HPA axis recalibrates, the aura expands, the radiant body activates. The body that was built for surviving begins cell by cell to be rebuilt for thriving. That is the Quixote. That is the death bloom happening in you. What dies is the version of you who did not know she was the rose. She was never the problem, she was the rosette. She stored everything beautifully. She protected the medicine through every drought the lineage survived. She deserves to be honored before she composts. She was doing exactly what she was built to do. But she is not who you are now. What you are now is the bloom, the fragrance already releasing, the seeds already in the wind, the pups already rooted at your base, your children, your students, your community, the 7 generations coming who will be born into the nervous system you rebuilt in your own body in your own lifetime. They will not know what you stored, so they would not have to. They will simply know the soil as rich. They will simply reach upward without remembering what it cost the mother plant to make that reaching possible. That is the inheritance. That is the garden fully tended. Satnam, beautiful Sovereign Sisters, and welcome back to the Sovereign Sister Movement podcast. I am Veronica Barragan, and I am so thrilled to be back with each and every one of you. This is the invitation that I just read to you that closes my book, Tending the Ancestral Garden. And it really is the truest account of where I have been and where we have all been together in the ethers, in the lives, in the sanctuary, in sisterhood. Now, I want to explain to you what you just heard because a death bloom is exactly what the agave does at the end of her entire life. She grows and grows, right? And she becomes fortified through all these experience, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and she stores all this energy in her rosette. And most people walk past her and see nothing happening. When I was in Sedona and I came back from doing that ritual and that ceremony, of leaving the roses for all the women who had signed up to join me in Sedona, the first thing that I saw was that death bloom. And my husband then explained to me that seeing a death bloom, seeing the agave go through the death bloom is actually a very rare occasion. Like not a lot of people actually get to experience that because it's many, many years and then the agave actually goes through this last transformational phase, right? In one season, she converts everything that she has stored into a stalk called the quiote. 20 feet tall, blooming gold, feeding every pollinator in the valley. And the bloom costs her everything. The mother plant dies. But then what happens is that at her base, her pups are already rooted. So the next generation grows from what she spent as energy. And it's not just the plant, it's all of us because it's exactly what generational healing does in your body. Something stored for decades, for generations, for lifetimes, it finally transforms, it converts, and then something rises from that. But for in order for that to happen, something has to die. And then the next generation inherits that result. And it happened in my life, all my life, and especially these last few months. And if you're doing this work and if you're listening to this podcast, it's always happening in yours as well. And so today's episode, I want to share with you first this time that I took during the summer solstice to birth the book, which is also why we're now back with the podcast episode, but also what happened with this death bloom. Because it wasn't just the book, Tending the Ancestral Garden, Reclaiming the Sanctuary, that was birthed. It was also the pups, the virtual Sovereign Sister Sanctuary growth and community expanding, and the 6 in-person sanctuaries now all over the US and one in Mexico that are the pups that were birthed through that death bloom that I had to go through myself. And we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk about what had to die and how you go through this yourself and why this is so relevant right now. Because the other thing I want to talk to you all about is the return of the matriarch, the age of the golden age of consciousness, which ushers in us as women letting go of that savior mentality where we're here to save others or where we need saving, and understanding that the matriarch is fully protected and that she protects from the spiritual realm, that she understands the death bloom. And she understands that her life, first of all, as a woman, is the highest incarnation she can take. And that what she does in this world actually impacts 7 generations before and after us. And that's the authority that is held in our lineage as the matriarch, and why it's so important for us to decolonize our mind. And this era is offering us the support, the energetic frequency to be able to do that. And then I want to share with you some of the astrological things that are happening, especially this week, regardless of when you're listening to this podcast episode. But what's happening in July that really marks this end of this old era and ushers in a new era that, even though it feels very uncomfortable, is actually really bringing forth an era where we are leaving behind the things that were no longer working. As much as you want to go back to the old ways of being, the reason why they're being exposed, the reason why systems are collapsing, the reason why generational healing has become so important is because it's like we finally ripped off a band-aid from a very infected wound. So today in this episode, I want to go through that because I'm positive that if you're listening to this podcast episode, if you are called to the generational healing journey, to the self-realization journey, to remember who you truly are, then you yourself went to this through this death bloom that I just shared with you from my book. Now, Tending the Ancestral Garden, Reclaiming the Sanctuary is published now. It was birthed at the Rose Garden ceremony in Sedona on the summer solstice. Thank you to all of you that joined me. Like I've shared with you all on my lives, I really do feel first, it was more than anything a reunion of souls. Second, everybody who was there contributed to the changing of each and every one of our destinies. Because destiny is not a set in stone. Destiny is basically a journey that you take and it based on how much evolution, meaning how much you go above your patterns of past lives, generational. Based on that is what how you change your destiny, how you create it, how it's not something static that you have to keep repeating because your ancestors repeat it. So for those of you that joined me in Sedona, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart because it truly was an incredible reunion of souls. It was exactly what we needed as energetic grid points to be able to practice the Kundalini yoga together on this sacred land during a time of the summer solstice where the energy that we are receiving from the sun is so potent and it really provides us an opportunity to do major subconscious psychic surgery on our subconscious mind. So all of you that said yes courageously, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for joining us also for the Jeep pilgrimage where we actually got to go to the sacred land of Sedona, specific vortex points, because as you know, I've been traveling and pilgrimaging to Sedona for more than 20 years. And to be able to come together and howl like the wolves that we are and meditate and connect with our own sacred ancestral gifts, which is really just God moving through us, was absolutely life changing. And as you know, coming back, I needed time for integration, as I'm sure many of you did as well. And truly to just even accept that this book was birthed. Because for me, it was a revolutionary experience. It was a psychedelic out of body experience. The book is a tribute to the Cosmic Mother, who is known as Coatlicue, Tonantzin. You might know her as Ari Shakti. You might know her as Our Lady of Guadalupe. Look, she has a lot of different names, but there's only one Cosmic Mother. And that is what the big revolutionary change that we are moving through as humanity. And this is why the matriarch also is so important for us to discuss today. But in either case, there's this feminine cosmic mother energy that is calling to us and that is also really showing us how much we have always been protected. And so the book in itself is a tribute to the Cosmic Mother. It's a tribute to my sons because it's a tribute to how I myself took on this journey. We're all chosen, but I chose myself to not just heal me, but to heal lineages and to remember that we are the rose, that we are royalty, and that there's nothing that we have to do in order for God, Source, to love us. That the work that we is more than anything work, it's devotion. Devotion to our inner sanctuary, to that experience of God within our body, which changes your complete life. So the Cosmic Mother is calling for us to come together and to reclaim that inner sanctuary because the roses are generational healing, a sign of wealth and prosperity, what we know it to be in the Kundalini Yoga tradition. And I talk a lot about it inside of the book from even all different aspects of tradition, is you remembering that you're the rose and you blooming so that you can share your fragrance with the world. And that's the same roses that Tonantzin, who some people know as Our Lady of Guadalupe, asked Juan Diego to gather on the hill at the Tepeyac back in 1513, or was it 1531? Might be switching up those numbers. But in essence, in the early 1500s, Juan Diego comes up to the Tepeyac, a beautiful mountain where the indigenous people were already praying to and connecting with the Cosmic Mother. So the religion is the one that changed her name and tried to claim her as Our Lady of Guadalupe, who my ancestors absolutely prayed for. And the name is not important, it's the same cosmic mother. But religion really tried to like make her theirs so that they could convert others and use her more as a fear mongering than what she really was here to do, which was to liberate us all, to remind us of the serpent life force energy that lives within us. So Don Ancin tells Juan Diego at the Tepeyac, hey, bring me the roses. And she didn't say build a church. She said build the sanctuary for me and the roses. And the Cosmic Mother this book was written for is already creating those miracles in the lives of the women holding it. Because this is the sanctuary inner sanctuary that you are creating for her from within, where you remember you're the rose, where you remember you are loved unconditionally, where you remember that God is not this dude that sits on a chair and judges you all day. And then the beautiful part of that is that when you build the sanctuary, you're you yourself, meaning you reclaim the sanctuary, you reclaim your body because we know that the body keeps score of trauma, and that's why we don't feel safe in our bodies because of all the hormonal cortisol and adrenaline wars that we consistently live in because our body is keeping score of that trauma and we still think we're in that traumatic experience even though it happened when we were two in the womb or even in a past lifetime. So the cosmic mother knows that, and that's what she's saying, rebuild the sanctuary through these practices of Kundalini yoga, Kriya yoga, which is how we release these memories from the body so that you can reclaim the sanctuary and bloom and share your fragrance. We don't feel safe being authentically ourselves and blooming and accepting ourselves as a rose because of the traumatic experiences that we've been through. And the Cosmic Mother, who this book was written for, she is here to remind you that there is no difficulty of miracles. And that when you have that connection with the higher power, with the divine, when you experience God within you, when you experience the Cosmic Mother within you through these practices, that you actually learn to live, that you actually go from survival to thriving. And the pups, that's where basically your legacy. It's the legacy that is now birthed through this book from the ability for me to surrender to this death bloom. Because you better believe writing this book was incredibly transformational. It was deep, it was lethargic. There were many days where I was frozen and I didn't have anything coming through me. The more I pushed, the less that happened. So I had to learn to surrender, to allow the Cosmic Mother to work through me. Many times I thought I was literally dying. Many things started to show up in my life, especially when I saw the death bloom and I saw the agave. I was thinking to myself, oh my God, does that literally mean physical death? And physical death is not even real because it's just a transformation. So when I saw the death bloom the agave was going through, I realized that's what I'm going through myself. And you see, when we are somebody who's living in high levels of stress, we don't notice the plants, we don't notice the birds, we don't notice anything around us. And I recently heard that there's scientific study that says that if you're someone that notices birds a lot, which I never did before, and now they're like my guiding light, they're my ancestors, they're literally how God speaks to me in so many ways. It is scientifically proven that those that notice birds, that means that their prefrontal cortex part of the brain is more developed. Back when I was living in high levels of survival and stress patterns, where my body was storing all this trauma, I didn't notice any birds. I didn't notice any roses. I didn't notice any flowers. I didn't notice the tree. I didn't notice nature. It's like you could be in the most beautiful island on vacation, and your nervous system is in fight and flight patterns from the high levels of stress you always lived in, whether this lifetime or past lifetimes, and you're worried. You don't even notice the beauty of the beach. You don't notice the beauty of the trees. It has everything to do with your prefrontal cortex part of the brain. So the practice allowed me to not just notice the agave, but to then integrate what it was teaching me. And a lot of us don't make it through these death blooms where the pups are literally now birthed, the in-person sanctuaries, the Sovereign Sister Sanctuary, because we don't understand. We feel like we're being punished. These death blooms, they show up in many different ways, like a divorce or an illness, headaches, right? All these bodily sensations. And if our nervous system is not re-educated, we're gonna think we're being punished or something's wrong with us, or literally like we create a self-fulfilling prophecy of like I'm dying, right? And so because of my devotional work with Kundalini Yoga therapy, which is my daily sadhana practice, I understood what that agave was teaching me. And the invitation was that the pups were already rooted at the base of the soil. And what it looks like in my real life is now the six in-person sanctuaries, which are complementary to all women, now also opening this month of July. We have Jack leading as a facilitator because the facilitators went through 10 weeks of mentorship and training. And these are all complimentary to women. And they signed up because they were being called as facilitators to teach. You know what they say? In order to master something, teach it, right? So now we have Los Angeles, California, Jack, beautiful Jack, facilitating that space. In El Paso, Texas, our sister Leticia. In Los Gatos, California, our sister Cristina. In Rancho Cucamonga, the first one we launched on Saturday, July 18th, the day that I will never forget, our beautiful sister Samantha facilitating that space, that sanctuary. In Phoenix, Arizona, we have a couple of chapters that are opening. One in Buckeye, Alejandra, and Phoenix, I'm going to lead one myself. And then we have Chihuahua, Mexico. We're international. Chihuahua being led by Jaira. So these are all real sanctuaries in two different countries now, where sisters come together in sisterhood. They co-regulate their nervous systems with Kundalini Yoga meditation. They devote themselves to the spiritual study of the Christ consciousness, which has just nothing to do with religion. So that's why I had to go through that death bloom. I had to feel safe in that death bloom so that we could actually birth not just the book together, but also the actual in-person sanctuaries. And don't worry, because if your city isn't on the list yet, we have a whole second round of sanctuaries that are launching in the next coming weeks. So check it out. Actually, you can go to the website, sovereignsistersanctuary.com. And before I forget, thank you for liking this episode. Thank you for dropping a comment below. Thank you for sharing it with the community, sister, because you all know that I forget. And thank you for remembering that you are the rose. So that's what exactly where I've been. This energy, the rosette, and I say 30 years because I've been on my healing evolutionary journey since probably 2008. But truly knowing myself as a mystic that I am since I was born. And it's common because, especially if your family has been through trauma, there was recently a Harvard study that I was sharing on my live transmissions. As you all know, I go live on TikTok Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And I was sharing how there's like studies that show that if one generation is psychic, then the next generation is psychic as well. Or there's certain gifts like clairvoyance or clairknowing or all pattern recognition, right? But that makes sense because as we've been talking about in our community, trauma in itself activates these gifts, these psychic gifts. But the problem here becomes then that they're activated because your nervous system and has gone into fight and flight, and your consciousness has left your body to try to protect you, right? But most people are so overwhelmed by them. Either they think they're evil, or they're not from God, or they don't know how to contain them in the body who still retains the trauma. So of course it's going to feel like high levels of anxiety. Of course it's going to feel like something you're doing wrong, or you're going to think it's you when it's just God moving through you. So that's why these practices are so important, because the container is important, which is your body. Now, my container, I've been practicing Kundalini Yoga. I've been on my healing and spiritual journey of evolution since 2008 when my spiritual awakening first occurred, which it wasn't a one day thing. It was like a gradual evolution that uncoiled itself, but really practicing Kundalini Yoga since 2017. And that has absolutely transformed my nervous system and my brain. So when I was going through this death bloom, I was the container for it. I was able to be present through it. I was able to quantify what God was showing me. And even though it was very transformative and it felt pressurized, it was the most beautiful death bloom that I've ever been through. It was one of trust and surrender, major detoxification, because the death bloom also allowed me to release like stimulants like coffee, because I was going to be in, especially in person with these beautiful roses in Sedona, where I needed to be present and I needed to be fully in my body. So everything that composted is exactly what we're going through as humanity, but especially for women. Because what I'm going to share with you next, it requires courage and it requires your willingness to see things differently and to see things more through the eyes of source, through the eyes of light, not the darkness that many of us get lost in. Something wrong with darkness in this world. When you incarnate, you're part of the polarity. Darkness and light exist. You're never going to get rid of it. But there's no such thing as evil. There's darkness and light. And we learn to dance and we learn to remember that we are the light to bring the light where the darkness exists. Now, the mother plant typically does not survive the bloom, right? And I told you, there's a version of me that composted, no longer here. And now I want to name that part very directly and clearly because she lives in you too. And it's when we resist an old identity, right? When we resist the evolution, because that's what healing is, that is when we create suffering and when we create time. Now, the old version of me, and this is the old version of so many women, where now the matriarch has risen. The old version, women were saviors. You know, she keeps the medicine small. Witch's wound is real, where perhaps your grandmother, great grandmother, your own mom, very intuitive. Maybe she was very spiritual. Maybe she was a healer herself, where she could heal energetically. She went through persecution. She went through being called names. She was colonized through religion. So what do? 5, 6, 7 generations later, or even because of your past lifetime? Well, you hide your medicine. You stay in the closet spiritually. That's who I was for a very long time. The women who pours out also for everyone and calls it, I'm helping. Dr. Gabor Mate says the kindest people are the ones that get the sickest. And it's not just kindness. I need to bypass the severe pain that I'm going through in here. So I'm going to go focus and save others. Or I need to save others because of the fact that I don't trust God. And the problem with that is that it's actually known as fusion. Fusion is when and being empath or being compassionate is you can be with someone in their pain and not have to change it. But when your nervous system is so dysregulated because you haven't sat with your own pain, you're going to have this need to then go and absorb the other person's energy and to also save them. And that's you not knowing God. The matriarch, it does not save. The matriarch is basically so spiritually protected, and she knows this because she has a spiritual devotional practice that she doesn't have to rely on her saving or her changing anyone's life. She only relies on God's strength. And this is proven throughout history. If you look at pictures of Isis and Osiris in Egypt, for example, her hand is behind Osiris, her husband, because she is protecting him in the spiritual. When a woman does not have a spiritual practice, her children are not protected, her husband is not protected, her house is not protected. Because the woman protects in the spiritual, the man protects in the physical. So, you being a woman who pours out for everyone and doesn't have enough vitality for herself, that's like you putting on the masks on others in a plane that's losing oxygen. That's why the pilot will tell you, put the oxygen mask on first. Because how are you going to help everyone around you? So that's why women, Dr. Gabor Mate says that help others only, they get sick. And that is the old version of woman. And why? Because we forgot that woman is the highest incarnation you can ever take. That's not just a teaching from Kundalini Yoga. You'll read this in a lot of different spiritual traditions. It just has been hidden, right? And I'm not saying that women are better than men. What I'm saying is that we have the power of the womb. And it doesn't mean that in order for you to be a powerful woman, you would have had to have birthed babies. We are creators. We are able to create from the unknown. Immaculate conception is available to all of us, and it happens all the time. But we forgot. And because we forgot, we belittle ourselves. We don't feel protected in this world. We don't have a connection to our the cosmic mother, to God. And so we constantly live in survival, in a drought, in the desert, where we feel that we're not supported, and we feel then that we have to worry, and that worry is what protects our children and our lineage. Every lineage that survived drought, basically that went through a lot of generational trauma, right? Then the woman stores all of that as medicine, not just as trauma, too. There's a lot of patterns of coping mechanisms, but there's also medicine. And that's why we have to let her compost, meaning this old way of being, relying only on our own strength. When I hear women say, I'm so tired, it's because you're relying only on your own strength. You're not, many of the things that especially we experience in the generational trauma patterns, they can only be healed by bringing them to the highest power. And the reason why is because think about it, it's kind of like the story of Jesus Christ when he was on that cross. He said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." Why? He went to God. Don't get tripped up on father, male, or female, because God is pure energy. God doesn't have, for example, male, female attributes. In addition, the closest that I can feel God is actually feminine, because she comes from create. She's the only one that can create. It's like she's like this feminine energy that decided she wanted to experience herself through you, through us as a soul. And then she created the polarity, which is the the masculine energy. And she said, go and experience yourself. And then the masculine energy all of a sudden decided to become God himself or herself, because we all carry masculine energy within us. And then now here we are with what was created in the world. So it's like two atoms that split. And again, it's not good or bad. But we have to remember that we were never saviors. No one needs to be saved. God is not a punishing God. We did keep our medicine small and careful, not for anyone to see it. But this is a time for us to trust our intuitive knowing, because this great second coming of the Christ consciousness, whether you call it the golden age of consciousness, whether you call it the prophecy of the condor or the eagle, there is no middle person between you and source. And that's the beauty of the matriarch, because she understands that through these death blooms that she rises. She rises even more powerful, and she becomes exactly who she's here to become, the light, the highest daughter of God, which all of us are. And that's the whole thing that none of us were ever taught. And of course, that was done on purpose. So the matriarch, the word itself, matriarch, it means matter or mother, and arch in, which means to lead. The mother who leads. So you see how it's not the mother who serves everyone until she's empty? The mother who governs, the spiritual and cultural center of the people around her. And she's not new. She's actually the oldest office our lineage ever held. We can look through this through so many different parts of the world. For example, in the isthmus of Tehuantepec in Oaxaca, the Zapotec women have run the markets and the household economies for centuries. And visitors wrote home in astonishment about towns where the women held the money and the standing. Across West Africa, the queen mothers held their own courts and their own veto. And in the Mexica, the world of what some of you might know as the Aztecs, but their real name is the Mexica. The divine itself had a mother, Coatlicue, mother of the gods. It's exactly what tending the ancestral garden, the tribute is for. Our revered mother, whose shrine stands on the hill of Tepeyac, but all over the world she's had apparitions. And in her own family, you know what happens when the matriarch transitions? She was your abuela. She was your abuelita. She was the curandera, maybe. Maybe she was the mother who always went to church. There's a matriarch, the one who prays on you. The reason I have this tattoo of Tonantzin, I call her Tonantzin, is because this is who my ancestors have always prayed for. And this is how I honor them and how I'm reminded that their prayers are still holding me together. Their prayers are the whole reason why I am who I am today. It's not just trauma. It's their prayers that have led me to this beautiful path of knowing that I can heal myself in 7 generations before and after. So those matriarchs are the blessings that you needed before your journey and that are still here as part of your DNA and genetic compose, what your genetics are composed of. And every culture in our sisterhood in the world, whether you're talking about Latin America, indigenous, African, European, there was always a matriarch, and she was the keeper. So what happened to her? Well, empires happened, colonization happened. All these ways for the matriarch to be basically looked at as weak or evil because she has intuitive powers. She can heal through herbs. She works with the natural cycles of the world. And so they suppressed the matriarch. And even look at the idea of Our Lady of Guadalupe or Tonantzin, that's her real name, Coatlicue. She comes to the Tepeyac. She asks for a sanctuary to be built. And what do? They start building a church. And if you look at all the places that were colonized in the world, whether you look at Mexico, Spain, where they built churches are very powerful grid points. Energy moves differently in those areas. They took them all down and then they built their churches on top of them. There's a reason for that. There's something that needs to be hidden. And yet, here we are still talking about her today because this is the return of that remembrance. Even if there were boarding schools, even if there were all the systemic trauma, the colonization, the religious trauma, we are still now experiencing her in our bodies. This is why it's so important for you to not be afraid of the death bloom, for you to not want to go back to the way the world used to be. We finally took off the band-aid. The matriarch is being restored. She never left, but there's certain times we go through as humanity where the sun and the earth are in a specific position where we forget. And we went through this incredible transit in February of this year where Mother Earth and the sun were in this angle that we haven't experienced for more than 5,000 years. And if you go back to 5,000 years, we're talking about what they say, which I will change here very soon, is the beginning of time. So now Mother Earth is receiving solar flares and sun rays from the sun that we've never received. And we are impacted by that in our brain and our nervous system. That's why this is a great revelation. What was done in the dark has to come in the light, has to come to the light. And that's the great frequency that we're all moving through right now. But as above, so below. It's happening in our personal lives. This is also why generational healing has become so important and why so many people are being called to it. And if you think about the matriarch, she was never there to save anyone because her trust and her connection to God carry that protection. The world suffers when a woman is the savior and not the matriarch. And that's what we've experienced for the age of Pisces. When I get it, it's the survival patterns. I get it that made her forget that her legacy spans 7 generations before and after her. But here you are today listening to this. Here you are today, now being literally the daughter that your ancestors prayed for. And that is why we have to be okay with death blooms, with old identities dying. Because ultimately, when that happens, what is left is your authentic truth, your light. What is left is you knowing that the cosmic mother is guiding you, protecting you, that you can actually live, that you can actually create without feeling like someone's gonna judge you. And even if they do, it doesn't matter because you know who you are. And what's so interesting is that the astrology, especially of July, is confirming why this death bloom could not have happened sooner, why specifically so many women are going through this death bloom and cannot quantify it. And what we're experiencing right now, astrologically, is a once in a lifetime experience where when we track it back to the anytime this has happened, this has marked the end of civilizations. And this is not to fearmonger. In fact, when we see these particular astrological events, which I'm going to share with you today, it's like the beginning of a whole new way of existing. So think of it this way, like when the world or humanity accepted that the Mother Earth was not flat, right? That she was round and that you could pilgrimage and travel through it. That changed the entire world. So what I'm referring to that's happening in July that really makes this timely as it relates to the matriarch returning, as it relates to you going through your own death bloom, is what is known as Barbault's basket. So Barbault's basket, it has to deal with this French astrologer. His name was Andrew Barbault. And this guy spent his whole life just studying the outer planets. And the outer planets are important because they're the ones that move the slowest. So anytime they do a specific move or change, it's big revolutionary change. So you know how your astrology, you can look like daily, you can look at it daily and weekly and monthly to see what what the weather is astrologically because it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, when he focused on these particular outer planets, which was Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and he looked at historical past events, he noticed something very important that when they did a particular transit together, when they were pointing to each other together in a particular way, major cataclysmic shifts happen in civilizations. So the outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are exactly who we're dealing with right now in the month of July. And Andre Barbault, he was born in 1921. He studied these and he would prophesy certain things and he would predict certain things. He basically created what is known as the cyclic index. And basically, what this does is it measures whether these outer planets are bunching up together in the sky or like they're spreading apart, right? And then he would lay that measurement over centuries of history. And the pattern was like impossible to ignore because when those slow planets gather close, there's like an immense pressure that builds. It's like too many people crowding into one room and these old systems start to break down and the world starts to reorganize itself. So again, going back to when this happened, the Renaissance period, the Industrial Revolution, the rebuilding after like world wars. And in 1990, he wrote that the period around 2020 would bring a global crisis unlike anything that the modern world had actually seen. He died in October of 2019, but what he was predicting was the COVID, the pandemic. And he left also from that one more window that he basically predicted. And that window is now between July 19th and July 21st. What is known as Barbault's basket is forming in the sky astrologically. And so basically what it looks like a basket. It looks like a trapezoid. And each of the planets that are part of this are playing a huge role in this end of a civilization and the beginning of a new era. So the top of the basket is in opposition, Jupiter and Pluto. They're standing on exact opposites of the sky. So it's almost like two people sitting opposite ends of a seesaw. Jupiter, expansion, growth, Pluto, subconscious, the underworld. And an opposition is a face-to-face moment. So there is tension here. You can't hide anything. Both sides fully visible to each other. And Jupiter being the planet of expansion is making it bigger. So everything in the subconscious mind, everything that was done in the dark. Pluto is the planet of the deep and the buried. So the compost, the family secrets, right? Now they're face to face to each other and they're asking one question. What buried thing is ready to be brought up and grown or seen? Or the light to shine on it. That's why you're seeing all of these things being revealed. God is not somebody you mock. So those that have mocked God for a long time, it's not that God is punishing them because God will never punish you. God loves you unconditionally. But these people have created a certain karma. And karma is not punishment. Karma means there's an action and then there's an effect. So that is why this is happening right now. People are receiving their karma, which is why for those of you that have been on the generational healing journey, those of you that have always been neurospicy, that have always been in the Christ consciousness of, hey, you know what? Others are me, and I'm going to treat others the way I want to be treated, right? Well, this is a time of great victory, of great harvest, because what's really being pulled from the subconscious mind is also all of the ancestral gifts. And then we have at the base of the basket, which is a sextile. And sextiles are very harmonious. Uranus and Neptune. And Uranus, as it is very active right now during the summertime because Uranus just went into Gemini, which hasn't happened for 84 years. So we're already all feeling the breakthroughs, the this energy that feels very new, like we've never experienced it before, right? So, being that Uranus and Neptune are at the base of the basket and in a sextile, which is a friendly degree angle, think of it like two friends that are standing close enough to hand each other like the tools that they need. Where in opposition, where Jupiter and Pluto we were talking about is very confrontational, a sextile is very cooperative. And the base is what makes this basket and not just a standoff, right? It's actually giving tension somewhere to be held. So you got the tensions of the Uranus Pluto, but at least you got excuse me, of Jupiter and Pluto, but you got Uranus and Neptune catching all of that. And what do you hold or catch in a basket? Well, that's your harvest, right? So the subconscious mind purging, the dream states, the things that you are experiencing, that's what you're catching there as a gift. Again, if you don't understand death blooms, meaning an old identity has to die for the pups to be born, then you're treating this more as you're being punished. Now, this entire basket, it goes exact right around the 19th and the 20th. And what that means exact is that the angles hit their perfect measurement and they're all at 4 degrees from each other. And that's symbolic because 4 degrees represents the Cancerian matriarchal energy. And it's kind of cool because we just had a new moon in Cancer last week from Western astrology. And the new moon in Cancer is almost like ushering in this sign of the womb, right? The sign of the matriarch, the sign of the even in the dark, you'll still be able to see the light. So part of all of this that's happening is that what we're doing is we have to first understand that astrology is not something that you should fear because the planets don't cause anything. It's a weather forecast, it's a mirror. And it's a mirror of what is happening here on planet Earth inside of your body, as above, so below. So when you think about this, an agave doesn't bloom because everything stored inside it is actually ready to be birthed. And that's what the basket is confirming. The readiness has to come from you. You have to say yes to God, even if you don't feel ready. First of all, because you have to embody it, you have to take action on it. You have to come out of the spiritual closet. Why? Because the planets are not causing you to not come out of the spiritual closet and to do things. The planets are actually pushing you. They're creating this mirror effect where again they're showing you where the agave has died, subconscious mind, Pluto and Jupiter, but also where you are blooming, where the pups are blooming. And the pups, if they're blooming, you're not just gonna sit around and idle. You're then going to then usher them, right? Protect them through your devotional practice, right? So the basket is catching whatever it is that you are allowing the subconscious mind to purge and whatever it is that you're allowing Neptune and Uranus to bring to you as clarity, as breakthroughs, because Neptune is illusions, rose-colored glasses coming off, and Uranus is breakthrough, shocking revelations. So the assignment is for you to read the basket, to see what is being caught there, and to then do something about it, meaning respond differently. Beyond action, respond differently. If the subconscious mind is purging all the ways your mind is still colonized, instead of retracting back to victimhood and blaming the government and blaming your lineage, to really look at it, well, what are the things that I can control? Well, the only thing I can control is me. And if I'm the only one that I can control, then I'm going to focus on my inner world, because a big part of this matriarch revival and return is the fact that we're all recognizing that the spiritual world is what is real. The physical world is only created from the spiritual. And it's not like many parts of the world actually live like this still today. When I was in Angkor Wat in Cambodia, I mean, the spiritual is what is real. In Thailand, in Vietnam, there's sacred shrines that protect from spiritual energies that are put in front of a house, and then there's one inside of the house as well, because the spiritual energies are not separate from the physical existence. And it's only in the West where we think it's weird, where we're like, no, because of especially evangelical Christianity and religion, right? That it's like, no, you shouldn't talk to your ancestors. No, no, no. If you're seeing beyond the veil, something's wrong with you. You need to be careful. And that's the whole thing, that this Neptune in Uranus with the basket is going to really say, it's time for you to come out of the closet. It's time for you to start trusting your own experience. Even when I think about like people like Carl Jung, who was an incredible psychologist, which I recently just found out that he got a lot of his information from his wife, and his wife never got the credit for it. But he would go study mystics. He wasn't like studying people that would go to a university, because he understood that it's those that had an experience that were actually real teachers. And that's what I'm calling you as a matriarch. You've had experiences. I've had so many experiences. That's what gives you the permission to go lead and teach. It's not you having a degree. And the whole thing about this Barbault's basket is that it's going to show you, if you allow that death blow to occur, where you not only are being colonized still in the mind, but also where you are ready to liberate yourself, where you are ready to truly bloom, express yourself, and trust that intuition. So if you're going to put the whole basket in one sentence, it's more about us finding the limiting beliefs that we've carried forever, not just in this lifetime, but even in past lifetimes, and doing that through awareness, through our meditation practice, to see what the basket is catching, so that we can actually not just think differently, because it's beyond thinking differently, it's actually do differently. How are we responding to things? And so that we can then transform and convert what was stored into something that can rise, right? The pups. And that's the Kyoto's instructions now being shown to us astrologically. And very important for us to also trust that the wound, meaning is being exposed, meaning the band-aid coming off, that you have to accept that systems are going to collapse. Governmental systems, whether you're talking about healthcare systems, school systems, none of them are working. And the basket is catching all those things that are not working. And that's why we always have big revolutionary shifts in consciousness. And the beauty of it is that now we are all connected. It's not like before where it was just Jesus Christ saying these things when he was walking the earth, right? It's not like before when it was just Krishna walking the earth and saying these things about God is not separate from you, about the fact that you are the matriarch. As a woman, you are the highest incarnation. It's all of us. It's this energy awakening in each and every one of us. And it has everything to do a lot with plasma, which is the same thing as Kundalini energy, which lives at the fourth vertebrae of your spine. You can absolutely become a container for this. And plasma, fifth state of matter that we're seeing in the sky, even if you go look at the apparition of Fatima that occurred to those children, it was plasma. It was plasma energy. That's what the virgin is. That's what the apparitions are, because it's pure energy. And the earth is now in this perfect angle with mother with the sun, that we are literally, these things are going to become more and more obvious. They're going to become more normal. More and more people are going to be connected to the spiritual realm, understand energy. The awakening is only going to continue because if you think about it, trauma causes awakening. It's almost like they wanted to traumatize us and then they wanted to program us, but it backfired. Everything they're doing right now is like backfiring to control humanity, because what we did is instead we're like, well, I already hit rock bottom, so now I rise from this, and I realize how protected I am because of God. So it's actually backfiring. Like, think about even the World Cup. I've always shared with everyone that I as a little girl, I've always watched soccer with my dad. I played soccer. I coached my son's soccer. So the World Cup has always been very important to me. But I've always gotten very angry at it too, because of the fact that I've always seen also the politics, right? And the cheating and all these different things. And then this year, even though it's like and everything I'm saying here is for entertainment purposes only, allegedly, the way I look at it, it's like a big mafia, right? And they're always using it either to manipulate or put out a program or a narrative. But yet this year, it completely backfired on them, because it actually showed how united we all are, how similar we all are. And it exposed also the horrible cheating and abuse, and also how, like, literally this is like a Truman Show where they put all these actors, and this is the person that's gonna win, and then because this person wins, you guys are all gonna worship this person, and now he's gonna become the king and all this other stuff. But all of us called it out. We saw countries coming together, having an amazing time during the World Cup. It's almost like we were like kids where our parents got divorced and we were never allowed to hang out with each other anymore. And when we finally do get it back together and hang out, we realize how much we have in common and how much we love each other, right? It's these step parent or these parents that are divorced, that are angry at each other, that are creating the animosity. So even those things are backfiring, and the light is going to continue to reveal what was done in the dark, especially with this Barbault's basket. And with the matriarch returning, it is also why you are seeing basically also a lot of things come up as it relates to the abuse children have gone through. Do not mess with the cosmic mother and do not mess with her children. It's not punishment, it is karma for those people that have been doing this for many generations and many lifetimes, because now the position to Mother Earth, to the sun, Barbault's basket is bringing the light to where the darkness has always been. So this is why you yourself, going through your own death bloom, you have to ask yourself, you have to remind yourself first that from this death bloom, something bigger is going to rise out of you. And this is why I've always said that the biggest revolution that we're going through is not a technological one. It's actually an identity. Who are you? You know, our whole incarnation, the whole purpose of it is so that we can self-realize. That's what the second coming of Christ actually means. Self-realization as a light that we are. And we have to take on many incarnations to do that. But truly, we are in this incredible time where, as a matriarch, you remember that, hey, my life impacts 7 generations before and after you. When we live consciously like that and present like that, you realize that self-realization ultimately becomes the path. It becomes the journey. It becomes the byproduct. When I started my journey of healing myself, I didn't know that what I was doing was evolving, and I didn't know that it was going to impact 7 generations before and after me. I didn't know that the matriarch was going to be born within me. I didn't know that I had to go through all these death blooms. But I also didn't know that this last death bloom to birth this books would require me to become a vessel for the divine, but also would require me to have unconditional faith and unconditional knowing. And the reason why I was able to do that again was because I've learned to stay in my body. Because I think right now it's so easy for people to feel anxious, for people to feel despair, for people to feel lost. But it goes back to what you've done to the nervous system and brain to change that. And through these practices of Kriya Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, you can move through these identity deaths because it happen all the time. It's not just this death bloom that we're all going through collectively because of the astrological energies and the end of an era and the beginning of the golden age of consciousness. But you go through this all the time. When your kids graduate and you no longer are, you're an empty nester, that's an identity death. Or if there's a divorce, when anytime a cycle ends and you had your identity and worth tied into that, you're gonna suffer and you're gonna create pain. But if you do this devotional work of Kundalini Yoga meditation and you know who you are, and you don't need approval or validation because your nervous system and brain have changed, then all these ego deaths or these cycles that you close, you're not gonna suffer in pain. You're going to accept, you're going to understand through wisdom what is actually happening. And that's what a lot of people, women especially, don't realize. In order for the matriarch to rise, all those old identities of you being the savior or needing to be saved, of being the victim, of not believing and knowing that you are connected to God, they have to die. And that's an uncomfortable process because if it was simple and easy, I think all of us would easily transform, evolve, and change. So understanding that the darkness is part of the light and that there is no evil, but truly that you can build vitality in your nervous system through these practices, through chanting, through meditation, through Kundalini Yoga, that you can confront anything that's in front of you. And this is why those patterns compost at the door because the bloom rises. You need vitality and energy to go above patterns of thinking, of being. They cannot compost at the door of the gate to your garden, your ancestral garden, if there's no vitality and energy within you, prana. And that's the whole practice, right? Kundalini yoga through breathing, through chanting mantra, through meditation, you're building prana so that you can compost and death bloom and evolve because that's what healing is. And then this is the code, the keys that allow you to open the door, that allow you to go through the door because you have the energy instead of like getting stuck at the door or not even seeing the door because your subconscious mind is like a hotel room with a bunch of doors. And many of us, because we don't have energy, we don't have vitality because we're living in survival, just trying to make it through the day, our nervous system. We actually don't see the door, or we might see it, but we don't have the energy to open it. So think of the chanting mantras and Kundalini yoga, the breathing. That not only gives you the awareness of the door, but then you have the energy to open the door. And you know what you find at the other side of that compost, of the other side of the door? Because I had this personal experience myself in my meditation practice and through plant medicine when I was in the jungle. I found infinity on the other side of that door. It wasn't good or bad, it was infinite. Just infinity, neutral. And believe it or not, that brought me a lot of peace. We make this life way too difficult. We attach ourselves to false identities. And because of that, we many times collapse in the death bloom. And you're not being punished. You can learn through resurrection, or you can learn through self-realization. And you can even just stop the karmic loop of reincarnation. And we're not just here to clear our own karma, we're here to clear the collective Earth's karma. So, as much as you want to do this work to never reincarnate again, we don't do that. We surrender to this devotional practice so that we can uncoil our highest potential without a timeline, without a deadline, without conditions. And that's why my book ends with an invitation. Because the invitation is for you to rebuild your nervous system and brain, which means reclaim the sanctuary, so that you can have the prana and vitality to move through the death blooms that are brought forth in your life. And then the door opens and the pups are there. What is birthed at the legacy. the Sovereign Sister Sanctuary virtual community that has now expanded and grown. The 6 in-person sanctuaries, which are complimentary, by the way, for all women, now open. Los Angeles, El Paso, Los Gatos, Rancho Cucamonga, Phoenix, Chihuahua. These are real sanctuaries that because we were able to surrender, because I didn't write this book by myself, it was all of us that were courageous and willing to say, yes, I am worthy of going above these patterns. I am worthy of uncoiling my potential. I am worthy of remembering that I am the rose, that I am as God created me, that it wasn't just Jesus Christ. Even He said that. Stop worshiping me. It's not just me, all of us. All of us. You will go do bigger things than I have ever done, He said. In fact, that is literally the opening of my book. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also. In greater works than these shall he do. John 14:12. And you're here to do that. So, as a reminder for all of you that are here, ready to bloom, ready to go through the death blooms in community and in sisterhood, reminder that if your city isn't on the map yet, don't worry. We have a second round of in-person sanctuaries launching here in a few weeks. So stay connected by joining my newsletter on my website. I'll link it below here, veronicaberriganiam.com. And also to join us. Join us in the virtual sanctuary, which is open for enrollment. This month, we're actually working specifically on the aura and your inner child, which your inner child is not broken. This is exactly why people get stuck. They're like, oh, I have to heal my inner child. Your inner child is actually the most conscious, most purest, most connected aspect to God that is who you are. And what we have to do is reorganize the energy and release all these false identities, which are called splinter psyches, that actually are leading your day. And we're working that specifically this month because it is such an important aspect of the generational healing journey. So if you're interested in actually joining the journey of generational healing with us, you can hit the link in the bio right now to find out more about the virtual sanctuary, the Sovereign Sister Sanctuary, where you are able to integrate the practices, the Kundalini Yoga practices, the Christ consciousness teachings of Yogananda and Jesus Christ, the devotional work, the service devotional work as well. The link is below so you can check it out because it is time for you to rewire your nervous system and brain so you can uncoil potential beyond what you can imagine and so that you can remember that you are the rose, the matriarch that has risen, so that you can bring in and usher in this end of an era and welcome this incredible age of the golden age of consciousness where we all remember that we're not separate from source. And of course, you can also order my book, Tending the Ancestral Garden, everywhere books are sold. You can also go to my website, tendingtheancestralgarden.com. The book is not just my own personal experience of generational healing, 11 chapters of it, but it takes you through each of the 10 energetic layers of who you are. And it offers the quantum physics, it offers the science, it offers my own personal journey, how it shows up in your life, and the specific Kundalini yoga meditation to start to end that pattern and uncoil your potential. It also includes a specific section with journal prompts that are going to help you further become self-aware of what it is that you are here to uncoil. So you can pick up my book everywhere books are published. And like I said, on my website, tendingtheancestralgarden.com, which I'll link below. Overall, I just want to remind you all that this is a time of victory, a time of harvest, of expansion, especially for those of us that have been focused quietly, maybe, on unraveling and going beyond any limiter patterns. Look, all those years in your life have counted. They're important. It's not about changing them. It's about quantifying them and understanding that they have brought you to this day here today. And this is why all of your ancestral lineage, all of the past lifetimes you've been through, there's nothing ever to regret or to actually change. We have to rewire our nervous system and brain to learn to accept. And accept is 90% of the journey. And through that acceptance, the wisdom is found of the agave and the quiote going through that bloom and that death bloom with even excitement and joy, knowing that what is left from that is pure legacy. And that is why you matter and everything that has happened in your life matters. So we'll see you inside of the sanctuary. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for hitting that heart button. Thank you for leaving a comment below. I would love to know how you yourself have gone through your own death bloom, especially through the summer solstice, and how you are also now reclaiming that sanctuary and getting excited about the rebuilding of your truth, which is the Satnam. Thank you for being here, everyone. New episodes coming to you every single week. So thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for hitting that like button. And thank you for remembering that you're the rose and reclaiming the sanctuary. I will see you in the next episode. Satnam.